monitor a bunch of them, then we need to talk.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead.
And we'll rename them because the VA Advanced Directives one, I walked through it and just took off the VA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we chat kind of offline after this call? I'm still going to go through the demo that I was going to go through, which is to build a configurator to do the linkage that we talked about.
Okay.
And then I guess you and I can talk afterwards on how to tweak it to make it more useful.
Okay.
All right.
Do you want to go hop in on my side and go put these into what database you're in, so they'll be there for you to?
Nah, I don't think so. I mean,
Oh.
Yeah, probably not necessary.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have a good number of people on. I'm going to go ahead and start. Let's see. Let me turn on the recording here because I was asked to record this meeting. Okay, so the point of this meeting, I was asked to show and record how to develop a configurator. I think a number of you are familiar with the concept of configurators. A number of you are familiar with running configurators for certain purposes. But I don't think very many people are familiar with the under the hood and how it works and how they're built. So that's kind of the topic and purpose of this call. I'm going to get as far as I can in an hour. Hopefully, I'm sure I'll try to stop for questions, but I think in order to get done on time, I'm going to need to take some of those offline. So let me start with, let's start with sort of an overview of configurators, the architecture, I guess, the underlying parts and components, if you will. So can everybody see my screen, the web browser I have up? I have a MedCentral doc up.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So this doc is titled Architectural Overview of Configurators. I wrote it a long time ago. And thankfully, it hasn't really changed much since then. So there's a couple terminology pieces that you're going to need in order to understand how a configurator is built up. Basically, there's a configurator, a collector, a platform, and a transport. So the collector is kind of a name that we gave to spreadsheets that feed configurators. So a lot of times, and even myself, I've started just referring to them as spreadsheets, just because it's easier for people. But basically, in the configurator code, they're referred to as collectors. The configurator themselves are the logic that kind of drive, what this configurator is doing. So, there are certain configurators for loading patches. There are certain configurators for loading, laboratory tests or items into the drug file, or there are also kind of more specific configurators for, disabling or enabling existing drugs, or adding keys and menus to an existing user, and things of that nature. Basically, anytime we have kind of a bulk data task, a configurator is a good target or a good way to get that kind of task accomplished with a minimal amount of effort from a scripting side. Some of these things, if you've got to like flip one thing, in FileMan or something for 8,000 entries, it's going to be a lot faster to write the configurator to do it than to do it by hand. So then there's also a platform and a transport. So the idea of a platform is that the logic required to connect to any given Vista instance can be different. It depends on where you're connecting from, and it depends on what you're connecting to. So connecting to a Linux customer running GTM is going to be different than connecting to a Windows customer running cache. It's also going to be different if you're connecting, possibly different if you're connecting to an internal database versus a customer database, one that's run by MedSphere. Or if you're a developer, on a Linux box, you might be connecting to your own, local GTM instance. That might be different. It's very different depending on where you're going. So the platform class's job is to kind of encapsulate all of the logic required to do the connection, and put that in a nice, neat little package so that you can just say, I want to connect to Midland, or I want to connect to this QA box, and basically all the details are handled, and you don't have to think about it once you've written that class. And some of you who run configurators for patching purposes are familiar with defining your own platform. Basically, there's a couple templates that say, this is a Linux the last thing is a transport, and basically transports are used by platforms, and there's a number of them. There's basically one that connects via SSH. This is for connecting to Windows servers, Linux server, excuse me. One called Telnet that connects to Windows servers, cache, and a couple other ones that are like for local stuff. So if you're running Linux and you're connecting to GTM, then there's one for just running a shell and things of that nature. So the transports are used by the platforms to connect, to do the actual low-level connection bits of it. The platform has things like, first, get this login prompt, and then type this for my login, and then, run this command to get into OpenVista and things of that nature. So they're sort of a different layer. The transports can be reused between different platforms. So are there any questions at that level before we move on?
Sorry, what you call the one for GTM, the transport for GTM and Linux?
There are two. So if you're talking about like connecting over a network, then the transport is called SSH, which is, secure shell. It's what you do when you PuTTY, basically. And then if you're running a Linux box locally, then the transport is just called shell, I think, because it just launches a shell and then runs the OpenVista command locally. You're not going, there's no SSH involved.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so the configurator, so I'm going to sort of ignore the rest of them pretty much. They're not that interesting. Well, I guess the one thing I'll mention on the collector side is there's a number of different collectors too. So most of the time you're going to be using the CSV collector, the comma separated values collector, and that particular collector knows how to read a CSV file and then use that for data. There are a couple other ones like a TSV for tab separated, and I think there's one for Excel, but it doesn't really work unless you have a very, very specific Linux environment set up that can do the conversion on the fly. So anyway, there are a number of collector classes, but you don't end up modifying those yourself. Likewise, you don't modify the transport yourself. So anyway, the configurator. There are a number of phases that a configurator goes through, and some of you who have run configurators will have seen this in the log message that scroll by. But basically, if there is data required for this configurator, and many configurators, obviously require data. Some of them do not require data. For example, there's a test configurator. All it does is log in, log out. It doesn't require any data. I guess there's this XPAR one that I built for CareView that doesn't require any data because all it does is, set a couple XPARs to CAN values. So not all configurators will require data, but most will. So if data is required, then the first phase is going to be load data. So it's going to find the spreadsheet that you specify on the command line. It's going to go load that spreadsheet up using the appropriate collector, and then it's going to, put that in memory. The next phase is going to be the login. So it's going to go and call the login method on the platform class and, do all the appropriate logic to get logged into the site. Once it's logged into the target site, then there's a load mapping space. So mappings, basically, whenever we have, what do you call them, pointers in FileMan, whenever you have a pointer, there's a specific number of values that are valid for that field because, ignoring Lego, ignoring, adding as you go, but if you're, like, for example, if you're editing the new person file and you want to, add a security key to a person, you can't just make up any key you want. You have to go and, select a value that exists currently in the keys file. There's lots and lots and lots of examples of this when you're populating files. So what mappings do is they basically, it's hard when you're, like, in flight to put in a key, especially if there's like a very similarly named key, because then Vista tries to be helpful to the human user and starts, presenting prompts like, hey, did you mean this other one, or how about this one, and things of that nature. So that's really difficult for us to handle like on the fly, because we don't really know what to expect. So rather than handle that kind of thing on the fly, what we've done is we do these mappings. So going back to the new person example, what we would do is we would go do a FileMan print of every single security key in the system and store that in memory. And then when we go look at the spreadsheet and say, okay, well, we've got to go, add this security key, the provider key or whatever, we'll go look in that mapping that we've done to find the IEN of the provider key. And then when we go and enter the provider key, we just enter it by IEN. So we say, backtick 63 rather than provider, because there might be some other key named provider, and then it's going to ask us, weird questions that we can't answer. that's kind of the point of the mapping. So once we're logged in, we can go ahead and do that mapping phase where we go and for all of the mappings that this particular configurator will require, we go and do a file man print, and then we parse the output and store the mapping between the name of the thing and the internal entry number. So then the next phase is if the data was required, we will do a validate phase. So for every row in the spreadsheet, there's going to be some validation logic that's run. So we're going to do things like for free text fields, we're going to check the length. For like number fields, we're going to check that the number's not too big or not too small or has the right number of decimals and things of that nature. For pointer fields, we're going to validate that the entry in the pointer field exists in the mapping that we've done for that file. There's some fields where we don't want duplicates. So for example, like an SSN field, a new person file, we would make sure that there's no duplicates across the whole spreadsheet and things like that. So that's all handled in the validate phase. And the idea with the validate phase is to get rid of rows that are not going to be able to be entered successfully, and then not even try, because that's going to cause problems as we're doing the load. So we kind of kick those out ahead of time, and then we continue without them. There is a mode when you run configurators, and I'm not sure how many of you that currently run configurators know this, and it probably doesn't really count for the patch loading configurator, because the patch loading configurator will stop anyway every time it hits an unsuccessful value. But if you're loading data with other configurators, it will normally continue. It will just skip the bad value. If you don't want it to do this, you just want it to do the validation phase and then stop and not load anything so that you can see what failed, you can pass the -v flag for validate only when you run the configurator. So that's the validate phase. After the validate phase, we basically only have good rows left. We are expecting the remaining rows to load successfully. So we go ahead and run the prepare phase. The point of the prepare phase is to get you to the prompt that you need to be at in order to load the data. So for example, if you were editing a FileMan file, then the prepare phase might do something like, dpdi, get you to FileMan prompt, and then, 1 for enter edit, which file do you want to edit, this file, these are the fields I want to edit, okay, and then finally it takes you to the prompt that says, select, whatever file enter, and then at that point the prepare phase is done. So the process phase, or method I should say, it gets called over and over and over. It gets called once for every row of data. So you define basically this process method, and it says, okay, for every row of data, do these things. So it's already expecting to be at the prompt, so it might already be, select new person name. So it's going to expect that, and then it's going to type something in, and then it's going to expect the next prompt, type something in. It's going to do kind of that, back and forth of expecting this and typing that until it's done entering that one new person entry. Once it's done, then the next row will trigger process to be called again using the next row's data, and so on until all the rows are done. Once all the rows are done, then there's a cleanup phase. The cleanup phase is basically the reverse of the prepare phase. So it's going to expect to be dropped at a prompt like select new person name, and it's just going to push enter, and then it's going to be select file man operation or whatever, and it's press enter, and then it gets back down to the prompt, the mumps prompt. Once it's back down to the mumps prompt, then the logout from the platform class gets called, and then that logs you out of the system cleanly. And that's pretty much the life cycle of a configurator. The main phase, which I did not sort of mention, I kind of glossed over, is if you're not requiring data. So if your configurator just does some static thing and it doesn't, have row by row by row, instead of calling validate, prepare, process, and cleanup, it just calls main. So it'll load its mappings and do its login and stuff like that, but then it'll just call one main function once. And then that main function, you can go do what you want to do. It's not going to loop over stuff or anything like that. And then after the main function is done, it'll just call logout. So are there any questions on the phases of configurators?
Nope.
Right. So I'm going to, let's see. Why don't I walk through, we had, for the purposes of
Customer
education,
care, this is Jim May.
I was asked to create a while ago, maybe a month ago or so,
Dave.
A sort of template configurator that's not really a real configurator, but it's a template, much like the platforms have templates for, Linux customer or GTM customer or whatever. This this is a template configurator that doesn't really do anything. It's an abstract class, but it has a lot of the makings of a real configurator in it, and those lines of code are heavily commented to say, if you're building your own configurator, this is what you want, and answer these questions and sort of fill out this template, and you'll have a configurator for your own purposes. So I'm just going to go over and review that to kind of show that and explain some of that stuff so that we can see what I just talked about in code. And then once I've sort of finished reviewing that, we'll go and build a brand new configurator for this CareView setup step that Lee and I were discussing earlier. So I'm going to show you library, MedSphere, configurator. So all the classes that I talked about are in this library MedSphere directory. So there's collectors, configurators, you can ignore controller for a minute, platform, and transport. So I'm going to go into configurator, and then under miscellaneous, there is...
Hey, John, what box are you on?
This is my own laptop.
Okay.
So I run Linux. Obviously, you'll be doing development probably on Windows, and so you would be, opening Explorer windows to browse to the right directories.
Okay.
What was it called? Simple file man. There you go. So is this? Can you guys see this color, or should I turn off the syntax highlighting?
Yeah, okay. You can see it.
Okay. All right. So basically, all the stuff in blue are comments. So you know what? I'm just going to turn it off. I can't read it. Okay. So hopefully that's a little bit better. So basically, this is like I said, a template sort of, and it's a fictional configurator that populates a fictional droid file. I'm sort of a Star Wars fan, so Ben gives me a hard time about this, but so I've created this kind of dummy configurator to configure this dummy droid file. So one thing you'll notice here is that it has the keyword abstract here when we define the class, and this is to make sure that this particular file in its current form is never directly run. PHP, which is the language that configurators are written in, will throw an error if you try to actually run an abstract class. So if you were to copy this to a different file, called the droid configurator file or whatever, then you would have to take out the word abstract before it would work. The other thing is, this file is called the simple fileman template.php, but this, if you were to rename it to droid.php, then you'd have to rename the class as well. So this would have to change. Those of you who are, have edited platform files before are familiar with this concept, right? You rename, Linux customer GTM to, Hoboken or kern.php, and then you'll have to edit the file, you'll have to take out the keyword abstract, and you'll have to rename the, Linux customer GTM to kern. So it's the same concept here. You name your configurator, you change the class, you take out the abstract keyword. So as we walk through this, you'll see that so I have the data required variable set to true, and that basically tells the configurator that expect data, expect to load data, and also expect to run the prepare and process and clean up and invalidate phases. And then so once you say that data is required, you have to tell the configurator, or you should tell the configurator, a little bit about the required data. So by specifying this required fields array here, you're basically defining the columns of the spreadsheet that must be in place before this configurator can be run. So in this particular case, I'm looking for an IEN, and I'm looking for a droid type. And if you had other fields that you wanted to populate in this file, then you could add those as configurator or as a spreadsheet columns. So you can continue to add. So here this comment says, you can add a manufacturer column to your spreadsheet if you uncomment that. And that would, then the configurator would expect this manufacturer column, and if it wasn't present in the spreadsheet, then it would throw an error before it loads any data. So that's that. Then there's the validate method, and so I guess something I neglected to mention before is basically there's this base configurator. It's actually up here, MedSphere configurator abstract. There's this base configurator class that sort of has all of the helper methods, and it has kind of default and minimalistic implementation of all of these phases. So it has like a validate method that just, does nothing, and it has like a prepare method that does nothing. So when you build a concrete configurator that does something, you basically are saying, okay, well, give me everything in abstract, but in addition to that, let me replace some of the implementations that do nothing with an implementation that actually does something. So what we're doing here is we're redeclaring the validate method, and we're actually having it do some logic rather than, nothing. So what we're saying is, for each, this data, which is where the data gets stored from the load data phase, as row num, which gives us the row number. So that might be, it starts at 2 because the first row is the header row, and it will go to however many data rows you have. And then row is going to be a array of all the various data fields in that row. So there's going to be row at IEN and row at droid type and row at manufacturer. So there's going to be pieces in that row array that correspond to the individual cells. So it says here, uncomment the line below to force the first field to be 1 in 30 characters in length. So this is one validation check we might do. We might validate that the droid type is, between 1 and 30 characters in length. And you would do this, you would figure this out by looking at the FileMan data dictionary for a file and seeing, what its length limits are. You'd look that up, and then you kind of encode that logic here. Because like I said, if you put it here, the configurator is going to, look at that and throw that out before it even tries to go and put it into FileMan. If you neglect to do that, what might happen is, someone's going to give you, something with 45 characters when the max is 30, and then the configurator won't catch it because you didn't code it up in the validate phase. And then when you go to put it in to Vista, it's going to, throw an error, and then the configurator is going to kind of struggle to deal with that error. In most cases, it will sort of handle it gracefully. It'll just say, hey, I got something I did not recognize. I'm going to back away slowly, I'm going to push up caret, and then hit enter, and then wait a second, put up caret, hit enter, wait a second until I get back to the prompt, and then I'm going to kind of start over, resuming at the next row. That's kind of the default error handling mechanism, but it's not the most graceful thing. It'd be much better if we can, flag the bad row and then not load it in the first place. So another thing we can do is we can force the first field to be an integer. So maybe this thing is an integer and it's not a free text field. So we could say, oops, with my keyboard going on. Okay, well, so yeah, if you wanted to validate this particular column as an integer rather than a free text, then there's a different helper function, validate integer, instead of validate length, that you could use. If it is a set of codes that you're validating, then you can uncomment this line and basically, let's say that the droid type was a set of codes that's either astromech or protocol. So you could basically say validate set of codes, and then again you're specifying the column that you're doing and the row number, and then you're saying this is the valid set of codes. So you could put A, or the whole word astromech, or P, or the whole word protocol, much like the way Vista accepts them. And then there's also a flag that you can pass it that says validate force uppercase. So that means if somebody put in the spreadsheet just lowercase p, then the configurator will automatically convert it to uppercase before it tries to do this comparison. Otherwise, when it does this comparison, it'll fail, even though Vista might accept it. The other example here is the same set of codes check, except that it will allow a it will allow an empty value to pass. So some set of codes are required, but some set of codes are not. And so if you basically or this flag here, the validate empty string allowed with validate force uppercase, then it will both force the string to uppercase and it will not error on an empty string. The last, let's see, it says you can add as many validations as you'd like. So there's you can add multiple validations to one field. You can not have any validations on a particular field. You can do whatever you need to do. The last validation that's sort of a common one that I talked about a little bit earlier is that this for each loop is looping through every single piece of data, but some checks that you want to do are not done on each individual piece of data, but rather the entire set. So the one that comes to mind is validate unique. So you can say, okay, the IEN column of this spreadsheet should be unique. You shouldn't have IEN 15 with some data spreadsheet IEN15 with some other data, because then it's ambiguous, which one was loaded. Well, a little bit ambiguous. You could sort of conclude that the last one, won, but it won't give you any sort of warning about that. So if you say validate unique, then basically the first one will win, and the later one in the spreadsheet will get flagged as an error that says, hey, you already put IEN15 in the spreadsheet. We don't want to do it again. And then that way you'll get an error out of it, and that row will be flagged, and you'll know. So the next phase here is the prepare phase. So basically all we do is we're calling this helper method down here, fileman enter edit, and we're giving it a file number and then an array of fields. So these two variables are defined up here. So the file number is this fictional file number that I made up, 21, which is in the Medsphere namespace at least, or number space I should say, 2199.9. We're saying that's the fictional Droid file. And then specify the fields here. So the fields is also an array, and then usually to prevent ambiguity, we use field numbers. So you can look up the field numbers in the FileMan data dictionary to see what field numbers to use. But let's say field number 1.3 is the Droid type field, and then there's some other ones that you can add here. So basically what this FileMan enter edit will do is it'll call dpdi, and then it'll say enter or edit which file, and then we're going to put 2199.9, and then it'll say edit which field, and then we'll say 1.3, and then it'll say enter another field, and then you'll say 2.4, and then it'll say enter another field, and it'll say 2.5, and it'll say enter another field, and then the configurator will press enter, and then at that point you're expecting the select droid name prompt, and the prepare phase is done. Any questions so far? All right, so the next phase is the process phase. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the configurator, because now we're at the prompt we want, we're already logged in, we got all our data validated, we're ready to go, we're actually going to do the real work. In this case, because it's such a simple file, there's not a whole lot of real work to be done. So we're going to call our transport, which provides a chat method. So whatever transport it is, whether it be a telnet transport or a shell transport, an SSH transport, they all implement the same functions. So you don't have to care which transport you're actually calling when you say this transport. You just know that you're going to get a transport object, and that transport object is going to provide you with a chat function. And the chat function basically takes arguments, an unlimited number of arguments, but they take them in pairs. So the first item is going to be what I'm looking for from the server, and then when I get that thing, the next argument is going to be what I'm going to send back to the server. And you can do this in many pairs. So you can say, you can give it 4 arguments or 6 arguments, and basically, have a little dialogue with the server. So what we're doing here is we're expecting, well, I guess in this case, for clarity, I don't have any chat call that has more than 2 arguments. I'm just giving it 2, and then I'm making a separate chat call below because I have a whole bunch of comments before each one. So basically, here it's saying select droid name. Of course, if you had some other file like education topics that we'll see soon, you would say select education topic name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to throw in the IEN in response to that. So what this is doing here is it's in single quotes here we have a string, and then in that string it's putting a backtick, and then we're concatenating it. That's what this dot means in PHP with this variable, which is row, and then the IEN subscript, I guess, of that row. So we're basically saying, okay, take the IEN column from the spreadsheet at this row and put a backtick in front of it and send that in response to select droid name. So this is going to edit an existing entry. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be given a droid type prompt. That might be the next field in the file, so we're going to stick in the value from the row that corresponds to that. And the same thing here, and then the same thing here. Now this one, rather than grabbing a piece of data from the row, we're putting in a canned value. So sometimes, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. For the new person configurator, when we get to, DI user, disable user, we're always going to want to put no, because you're not, unless you have some special circumstance, in which case you have a custom configurator, you're not going to want to put in a user that's disabled. So sometimes you just have these canned values where you're always going to want to say yes, or you're always going to want to, put in some value. And I'm just trying to illustrate that you can do that. So finally, we have the cleanup function here, and the cleanup function, basically, this process function will get run over and over and over, once for every row, and then finally, you're going to run out of rows eventually, and then this is just doing a chat, and this is a 4-argument chat, right? You're going to select droid name, it's going to put blank, and then you're going to do select option, and then it's going to put blank. And at that point, you would be expected to drop back down to the mumps prompt, and then the logout function would get called. That's handled by the by the not by the configurator class, so we don't define it here. And then that's pretty much it. There's no more logic for that. That's configurator specific. So, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, John, I'm looking at those the above examples, and your first one up there, it's got like select droid name, and the other chats have just without the word select. I guess I'm trying to understand, is that you're not mimicking
FileMan, if you recall, editing a FileMan file,
yeah,
that's what it looks like, right? The first prompt says select, whatever it is that you're selecting.
Okay, I'm sorry. So it is mimicking FileMan. Okay.
Yeah, it's expecting these things coming out of FileMan.
That's right. I believe you. I'm sorry. I just didn't realize that's the way FileMan even worked. I didn't know if you were exactly mimicking FileMan or if it was just anecdotal type stuff. But you got to.
Yeah. Here, let me show you, because we got to do this anyway. So basically, the prepare phase up here, of course, I don't have an actual droid file to show you, but let's say it's the education topics file, because we're going to do that in a second. Education topics, and then it's going to say, edit which field, and I would say, 1.3, but I don't know which one's here, so I'm just going to hit all. And then, so you get this select education topics name, right?
Right.
So at this point, I would say something, general, and then, you'd say yes, and so on. And that actually isn't handled in this little example here, but you'd have to handle those things, and then you go on to edit fields.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, and I guess that's the point then. So the subsequent chats do not have like the select on like the droid type and manufacturer. I guess that's what I'm questioning.
So let me pull up one of these. So let's say VA diabetes. Oops. One VA VA. Okay. So the next prompt you get here is the name, right? And then the next prompt is an active flag, and all these. So these don't have the word select in front of them. Only the first one, where you're selecting something, has the word select.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
So this is common for most FileMan files.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to do is for CareView installation, Lee has informed me that there's kind of a time-consuming manual process where, and I think Lee had to drop for a different call. But there's this time-consuming process where they have these education topics, which I think is from the VA, and then they have the education major topics, which are from IHS. And in order for them to show up, the education topics to show up in CareView, you have to link the education topics to the education major topics. Otherwise, they won't show. So rather than go in and link up a couple hundred of these by hand, or however many they have, it makes a lot of sense to use a configurator for this. So I'm going to, based on her spec here, I'm going to build out a configurator that will do this mapping. So she's showing me here in this document that she sent me. Here's the education major topics, and this is what a sample list on her box looks like. Mine is actually a lot less than this. And then step 2 on the VA side, after you have looked at this abbreviation, then you're going to basically edit the education major topic, education topics file, the VA file. And then you're going to go through, and then you're going to set the major topic, and then you're going to set the mnemonic for this topic. And that links it up to a major topic, and then you're done. So I asked her to produce a spreadsheet of examples that we will use basically for this configurator. So you'll see that there's an education topic, there's a related education major topic that should be set on this education topic, and then the mnemonic that should be set on this education topic. so I'm going to go ahead and start building this and kind of talk my way through it. Anybody have any questions so far as to what we're trying to do?
Nope. Are these, so we're editing existing ones, or are we adding any of these new? I'm sorry.
Yeah, in this case, and this is what I was talking to Lee about shortly before the recording started, was it seems to me, so I had talked to her previously, and my impression was that all of the topics will already exist, and all this configurator has to do is link them, but it seems like I was wrong about that. There are certain ones that we add and certain ones that we rename. So I think for the purpose of this example, I only have 20 more minutes. I'm not going to be able to build something that complex. But I can build something that just does linking of existing entries, and I'll have to, make it more complex later.
Right.
Okay. Yep. All right. So here we go. I am going to copy this file to library manager configurator miscellaneous. I think I wanted to call it CareView education topics.php. So I'm going to edit this file. And we're going to have to remove the keyword abstract. We're going to call this CareView education topics. And then we're going to say required fields. So the required fields are education topic. Oh, that doesn't work. Education topic. We're going to say education major topic. And then we're going to say mnemonic. Then I don't need the rest of this. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is validate. So I guess for the validate ones, let's see, do I have validate mapping in here? I don't have. Okay, so the example is a little bit simplistic. So let me look up the signature. Let me look up the signature for. So there's this abstract configurator file, and I'm going to search for validate mapping. There's a validate mapping, and this is the signature, so I'm going to copy and paste. Okay, so and I don't have time to cover it in the call, but basically the abstract configurator is kind of the go-to source for all of the available little helper functions and things that are there. There is some code documentation. So the code is commented, but in addition, it's commented in a way that you can generate a HTML document from that code. So I think Derek already knows how to create that documentation. I can certainly try to post that as well, so you have an easier reference. But for me personally, I just kind of go find the code and look for it. So I'm going to call this validate mapping. The field is going to be education topic. The row number I'm going to leave because it's defined right here in the row number, and it's going to be different every time it iterates through this field. The mapping name, I didn't do mappings, did I? Okay, let me grab this as well then. I'm going to look, as an example, I'm going to look for something about like new person. So I'm going to look at this one. It has required fields, and then it also has required mapping. So I'm going to take this line here, I'm going to paste it here. And so very much like the required fields array, you can specify a required mappings array and map an existing file. So this is the education topic file, and I need to know the file number. So I'm going to hop out of here, go to OpenVista CareView RC1, CPI. Data dictionary, list file attributes, education topic. Oh, I guess I should say topic. mapping. So by default, once I've specified that, the configurator will go and automatically map those files for me, and those will be available to me. So here I'm going to say I'm going to map the education topic column. I'm going to check it against the education topic file, or mapping, I should say. And the flags will be to validate force uppercase. Because it's not going to make any sense if I don't specify an education topic, I'm not going to add the allow valid or allow empty flag here. So I'm going to ditch the rest of this stuff, and then the other thing I'm going to validate is the education major topic column. I'm going to validate that against the education major topics file with the same sort of logic. And then I guess the other thing I should do, this is wrong file, okay. I should go back and look at the education topics file and look at the, start with field. I want the mnemonic field. I want to see what the links are on this. So it says free text, enter the mnemonic code, can't be altered except by programmer. Unfortunately, they don't give a plain text description of what's there, so I think I might have to read a little bit of mumps here. Yeah, they don't say what the links are.
It looked like 12, John, if I was reading it right. Something about 1 to 12.
Yeah. So let's see here. AX is 45. What's ASCII X is 45.
Yeah.
So kill if X contains a quote,
or
if A
must be the delimiter, maybe. You can't have a.
The ASCII of A is 45, so I guess you can't start with ASCII 45.
Well, or is it just maybe it's the delimiter? Is that what I don't know what's our standard delimiter? The up caret? Is that what a 45 is?
The ASCII 45. Let's see what this is. ASCII table. So decimal is 45 is a hyphen. Okay, yeah. So they're basically saying you can't start with a hyphen. And then
execute if there's data in there to say kill if the length of X is greater than 12 or the length of X is less than 1. So it's got to be 1 to 12 characters, it looks like.
Length of X greater than 12 or the, yeah, okay. So it has to be 1 through 12, and 12 is allowed. And so it's
yeah,
1.
just the length though, right? It's just the length of it. So the string's limited to 1 to 12. Yeah.
And I don't remember exact arguments. So let me go back. Abstract, validate, length. So let's see, validate length. Field row num. So row num. And length is 1, max length is 12, and what flags do I have available? Empty allowed. So yeah, I don't need empty allowed. So that's that. And then, okay, so there's this other, I don't want to dig into it too much, but there's regular expression, so it's kind of like a pattern match.
Yeah.
There's these things called regular expressions. So in order to get this part, does not start with, well, doesn't contain a quote, I guess, and doesn't start with a dash. I'm going to call this validate regex method. So let's see, we don't need a flag. We need the field is this.date. I think I'm going to just do 2. So the regex is going to be, let's see. How do I do a negative? I have to say it starts with a character, and that character. It's actually other thing I have to validate is that it does not contain a quote, right? So, yeah, so it starts and ends with a quote, well, not a quote character. Yeah, and there has to be at least one, so I'll put a plus. Okay. So, I do not have time in the 10 minutes left to dig into what regular expressions are and the syntax, so I apologize for that. But basically, I've translated the mumps input transform into PHP. This I will probably leave out. Actually, I could validate unique education topics because you shouldn't really have more than one education topic in the same file. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare. So prepare, we know that the education topics file is this 999, that thing, and then the fields I'm going to edit are, and it's an array, and the array, the first value is going to be the education major topic, so now I've got to go back to my file man, so I'm going to say, I want to enter edit education topics, and then I can question here. So I want to edit the, where's the education major topic? Oh, major topic, 0.06 field. And then after that, I want to edit the mnemonic field, which is 1. So we can see what this is going to look like when I say 0.06, and then I say 1, and then I hit enter. So I'm going to be prompted with select education major topic. So I'm going to get rid of this, and then I'm going to start coding this. So I think for now, I'm just going to, let me question here. So I'm going to say, let's say VA diabetes, and then this will be avoided because I will have put in VA diabetes by IEN. So I'm going to say major topics, this is what I'm going to get next, and then, oh, well, okay. I don't think I can just put whatever I want, right? Oh, well, that's bad. I might have made an assumption here that that was a pointer when in reality it's not. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to copy and paste this and put it right here just as a reference while I code the rest of this up, because I'm basically going to be coding up chat statements that do this. I guess I could get rid of this because it's not really. So now I'm curious about this major topic, and I may not be able to address this shortcoming on the call because I sort of made an assumption maybe I shouldn't have. 8.1 education topics, subfile, select format standard, start with field major topic, go to field major topic, and what is it? It is free text. That is not good. Well, actually, maybe it's okay, because if we're using the configurator to force that it's validating against a valid major topic, then it may be okay. I'm going to roll with that for now and see how it goes. Okay, so let's see, 7 minutes left. This transport, actually, we're going to do something special here because we're forcing selection of a existing file. So rather than just doing a chat myself, I'm going to find in here, oh, you know what, wrong configurator, add keys, so we have an add keys and menus configurator that is supposed to add keys and menus to an existing user, and, at the beginning here we have this little construct where it says select existing record. And actually I need sort of this whole bit here. So I'm going to paste. So this try catch is basically an exception handling mechanism. What we're saying is we're going to try to do this, but if we get a missing record exception, meaning that that entry wasn't there, then it's going to log an error and say that the education topic, whatever, does not exist in the education topic file, and then that's file number, this guy. Yep. And then here, instead of select new person name, I'm going to say select education topics name. by the mapping, the education topic mapping, and then the row education topic. And I'm going to expect to see, after that, instead of expecting to see name, I'm going to expect to see major topic is the next prompt. So that was kind of a lot to follow. Basically, it's going to look for this prompt. It's going to enter a backtick indicating that this is an IEN, and then it's going to look up in the mappings, the education topics mapping that we did previously, the value from the spreadsheet, this row education topic. So this will be a string such as VA, diabetes, and then after it gets looked up in this mapping, it's going to come back with a number like 15, and then it's going to get the backtick prepended to the 15, and then that's what it's going to return to this to the server. And then if the server freaks out and says no, there's nothing like that, then this will get executed, and then it will move on to the next line. That's what this return does. It aborts out of the process function. So that will get us past our first prompt, and then from then on, we will want to do something like this: transport chat major topic colon, and then we're going to throw in the. So since this is not a pointer, normally if this was a pointer file, I do the same backtick kind of construction. But since this is not a pointer and it's just free text, I'm just going to put in the straight string. So this is going to be education major topic. It's just going to put what came in the spreadsheet. And actually, I can make this a 4-argument chat here because I know the next prompt is going to be mnemonic, and then I'm going to put in the mnemonic from the spreadsheet. And then that's it. Actually, there's no more to be done because after this, you're going to get back to the select education topics prompt, and then that will take you to the next iteration of the process loop. So the last thing here we're going to do is change this to say select education topic name and select option, and then that's going to clean it up and get out. So in the 3 minutes that I have left, I don't think I'm going to be able to run this because the data that we have is not going to match the data in my database. It's going to take some massaging. So you'll have to take it on faith that this sort of at least half does what I'm claiming that it does. But are there any questions?
No, that's pretty cool. So this PHP thing, this is no way limited to FileMan and mumps or anything like that, right? It's a generic tool that...
Yeah, PHP is a scripting language. You're familiar with Midden?
Yes.
Midden is built in PHP.
Okay.
By me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, you can build all sorts of stuff. PHP powers Facebook. Yahoo uses it.
Okay. All right. Cool.
WordPress blog platform is written in PHP. So PHP is a generic language. Yeah.
You wouldn't have any configurators already written to populate the sysy ADT parameters file, would you? This sounds like a perfect...
We do not, but that would certainly be, a target
for
automation.
Okay.
If there's things.
So going forward after your departure, for example, Derek might be able to help me do one of those, right?
Certainly.
Okay, thanks.
The idea. Okay, so thank you everybody for your time. I'm around for questions for the next few days, and Derek, I think, will be the primary maintainer of this project moving forward.
Cool.
I hope if you can't build one on your own, at least you have an understanding of what goes into building one, so that when it comes time to spec one for someone else to build, the common language is there.
Yep. Sincere form of flattery. We'll steal it. Yep. Cool.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Bye.